As some of you know, the board member previously heading this committee is now no longer on the board. And I asked Mr. Moss, and he was kind enough to accept for him to kind of take this on as an additional duty and continue his duties in finance and other things. So he's agreed he will be running the audit committee. Up to him how much integration between the audit and finance there will be. And I have promised to co-chair help him as much as I can as we do the process. As we integrate our new board members, which will be joining shortly. And we'll talk about probably, I think in September, we have our board retreat. Then we'll have an opportunity to talk about, I want to look at all the committees and how many we have and what's the right number and what's the right people. But in the interim, I've asked Mr. Moss to sort of take over audit and willing to do it. So just so you know, that's why John is running the meeting, and I'll turn it back over to him.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Walker. So let me note that we do have a quorum, and I'm going to first I'd like to ask a motion to approve the minutes of November 12th, 2025.
So moved.
Okay, second. Do we have a second?
You're the second. It's only the two of you.
Okay. All right. All in favor? Aye. Say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we will, with that, we will now start with the presentation from Plant Moran, the Plant Moran's our system external financial statement auditors on the annual audit of the 2025. The system's financial statements presented today are Oliver Alwick, Megan Warren, and Jessica Hamilton. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Plant Moran.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having us here today. We will spend a few minutes kind of covering the audit process here. And I want to thank everybody from Metro Health for all their cooperation and dedication of getting us to the point where we're ready to issue the audit. And I think we're in a great spot. If we're going to go to the next slide, we're just going to cover three key items with you today. We'll talk about where we are from the status of the audit, some of the items related to what we as independent auditors are engaged to do, and really kind of putting that all together, the items that fall under the audit standards about required communication from the independent auditors to those charged with governance. And for your organization, this is a committee that really has that oversight of the communication with the auditors. So we can move to the next slide, and Jessica is going to take us through the first handful of slides here.
Thanks, Oliver. So as of today, the financial statements are in draft form. We have completed substantially all of our audit procedures, and we are ready to issue. There are a few pending open items. So there's a few subsequent event items that we're still getting from management. We are also waiting on the approval of the statements by the committee here today. And then we will receive a signed management representation letter from management. And then after that, we will be ready to finalize. So moving on to the next slide. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about the audit scope and then move into the required communications. So I'm going to start here with the audit scope. So we have been engaged to complete the audit of the financial statements for Metro Health System. That's as of for the year ended December 31st, 2025. Included within the system audit, there's two discretely presented component units. So Metro Health Foundation and CCH Development. In addition to the work that we've completed on the system audit, we've also done an audit of federal awards, which this audit is a compliance audit where we look at compliance and controls to grants that we consider to be your major programs. The financial statements were prepared under government accounting standards as well as principles generally accepted in the United States. We have performed our audit under auditing standards, so government auditing standards, as well as auditing standards that are accepted in the United States. Moving on here to independence. So we would like to affirm our independence of both Metro Health and Metro Health's related parties. And in addition to what I just mentioned of the scope of the audit, we as Plant Moran also complete an audit of Select Assurance. So this is handled by a separate engagement team and is still in process.
So on the next slide, we're going to start with the required communications. So there are communications that we are required to provide the committee under U.S. generally accepted auditing standards, as Jessica had mentioned. So this slide delineates our responsibilities from management's responsibilities when it comes to the audit. So it's our opinion as the auditors to express an opinion on the financial statements that they are free of material misstatement and that they are stated in accordance with US GAAP. It's also our responsibility to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance that they are free of material misstatement, so not absolute assurance. What that basically means is that we're performing a risk-based audit. So we're identifying areas of significant risk, which generally is going to encompass areas where management has more judgment, more estimation, and we hone our audit procedures in those areas. It doesn't mean that we don't audit the full financial statements. We certainly do. The entire financial statements are under our purview, but we just hone in on those areas that are of more significant estimation. We also obtain an understanding of the internal controls over financial reporting. We talked about this pretty significantly when we were here to do our pre-audit communication. So we obtain an understanding of the internal control environment, how transactions are recorded, and that there are internal controls surrounding how they're recorded in the general ledger. It's also our responsibility to communicate any significant matters that come up throughout the course of our audit procedures and the inquiries that we're doing. So in your role overseeing the financial reporting process, if those were to come up, we would be sharing that with the committee here today. And then lastly, just reiterating that the auditing standards that we are employing here today are both the US auditing standards, but also government auditing standards, since Metro Health is a governmental entity. So management's responsibilities are the financial statements, preparing the financial statements, as well as all of the records that encompass the financial statements, all of the transactions and data that make up the financial statements are management's responsibility, as well as selecting and using appropriate accounting policies and maintaining sound internal controls. Management is also required to perform an assessment to determine if there are any factors that would indicate that Metro Health would not be continuing as a going concern for a year from now, essentially. There are no factors identified with Metro Health. There are no concerns there, but we're required to have a discussion about that at the committee meeting. And then lastly on this slide, we do want to mention that our opinion letter is going to indicate that we have an unmodified opinion. So this is sometimes called a clean opinion. It effectively means that we believe the financial statements are free of material misstatement, and this is the highest level of assurance that we can provide in our audit. So moving on to the next slide, we'll continue with some of the required communications, starting with significant accounting policies. Those are included in note 1 to the financial statements. We won't go over those in detail, but I do believe you have a draft financial statement to review. So if you wanted to look at those, that is where they're, that's where they are. They're basically the same as what they were last year. So no significant changes with those significant policies. We're also noting that there's no significant unusual transactions this year.
You had a question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and I don't know when we want to address this question. You talked about risk-based based
Yes.
on your determination, and I presume management's determination of what are the vulnerable aspects. That's one question.
It's
ours.
our
Yours.
determination of
only.
risk.
Uh,
Yes.
We're the ones that decide where risk is at and the procedures that we'll do to address that.
And so what I wanted to understand is the distinction between risk-based by your assessment, which is fine, versus concerns we would have as fiduciaries, as board members, about potential for fraud or malfeasance or mismanagement.
Yeah.
How do those two mesh? And we may not want to ask and answer that now, but I think I, as a board member, I
Yeah,
would like
so
to.
I think that's a great question, because without a doubt, on any audit, doesn't matter the entity, the items that are always risk is the concept of management override. And so if management, like, we have to evaluate if there's opportunities for management to override controls and lead to a situation like you described on fraud. And then there's a number of other things that we have a responsibility. There's an audit standard specific around auditing for significant fraud. And there's a number of things that we do to get to some of that. And that also includes understanding kind of the oversight that leadership provides and the tone at the top that leadership really permeates throughout the organization, that such actions won't be tolerated by anybody throughout the organization. So those are definitely things that are going to be items that auditors are always going to have to focus attention on.
I would just say to the leaders in the room, I'm not concerned about your performance. I want to make sure that we have the controls in place that somewhere, somehow, somebody doesn't, I love the term management override. So thanks for helping me understand.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we also wanted to make the committee aware that Metro Health did adopt a new GASB accounting pronouncement this year, which was GASB 102, which is over certain risk disclosures. So effectively, this pronouncement is just saying that if there are any constraints or anything that could potentially come to pass in the next year, that Metro Health would be disclosing that in the financial statement. So it's actually just a disclosure pronouncement. It has nothing to do with recognition in the financial statements. So Metro Health did put together an analysis of that, and there is actually nothing that would meet that criteria for that standard for 2025. Moving on to the next section, this is surrounding sensitive accounting estimates and significant balances. So again, I mentioned that we do perform a risk-based audit and that there are significant areas of estimation. And these are what is listed here on the slide. So starting with the net realizable value of accounts receivable and revenue, this is one of the most significant areas of estimation on the financial statement. So this is a big area that we spend time developing procedures around. The state of Ohio HAP program, so these are supplemental payments that are received from the Medicaid program. These are very significant balances. So again, making sure that the recognition of those payments are appropriately recorded in the financial statements. There's the reserve for medical malpractice claims. So this is claims surrounding general and professional liabilities. Metro Health does use an actuary to determine what that liability is. So we review all of the underlying assumptions and the claims data that is utilized by the actuary to determine what those liabilities are. There's also the pension and OPEB liabilities, which are representative of the amounts that Metro Health owes to the OPERS program on behalf of the employees at Metro Health. Cash investments and debt are very significant balances on the balance sheet, and we do confirm those balances with third parties. So we get very comfortable that the stated balances are appropriately recorded. And lastly, leases and SPIDA arrangements, we do audit. Again, those are material balances as well. So we evaluate management's methodologies, all of the factors that they use to determine those balances. All are reasonable, and all of the recorded balances are reasonable as well. And then lastly, just no significant disclosures. Again, the disclosures are very similar to what you would have seen in the 2024 audited financial statements.
Okay. Any quick final questions before we have a resolution to accept?
You're gonna go through
There's a
the
couple,
final results.
if it's okay, we got a couple more slides still to cover.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. I'll try to speed things up
Okay.
here. If we move on this next slide, again, these are just more required communication. If we had any disagreements with management, obviously we'd have to inform you that if we had such a things, we would have been having conversations before today, obviously. Auditors also required to communicate to you if there was something that came to our attention during the audit that needed to result in an adjustment in your financial statements, we'd have to inform you of that. Happy to say that there weren't. We would also have to inform you of if there's any what we refer to as past adjustments. So these would be things that under our estimation are a different reflection of a balance than what management has. The threshold for reporting that to you, obviously we can, if there are items that are not significant, we can pass on them. We're saying that they don't impact the reader of a financial statement if they're not material. If anything of those that we and management both agree are differences, but we're passing on them, there's a very low threshold of triviality. Anything above that, we'd have to let governance know of these differences, imbalances, and happy to say we didn't have any of these either. So really just really a clean set of books, I think is the best way to put it. And then if we move to the next slide here, we can cover just from an internal control perspective, happy to say on the financial statement audit, as some of the things we talked about here, nothing raised to our attention of any issues or concerns with internal control that raised to a level of communication to governance, whether they fall under the category of significant deficiency or a material weakness. And then finally, on the next slide, related to the federal awards audit. So again, this is a separate audit from the financial statement audit. We issue a couple different opinion letters specific to the federal awards. So this is in essence around your compliance with all the federal grants that you've accepted and expended during 2025. You compile all that on a schedule of federal awards of CEPA, and then we do a bunch of testing on it. You can see here from a significant areas of focus perspective, one of the ones is very similar to the conversation we just had around management, oversight, and control. So again, in an environment of a single audit or federal awards, that is an area that is a risk area from the auditor standpoint as well. Metro Health had approximately $16 million of federal awards. When we go through the process, 3 of them are ones that we had to focus our testing on. They're what we constitute as material programs for Metro Health. For this year, they're listed there in the middle of the page. And really that's where the focus of our attention is from a testing of the grants. And then we're also testing the overall compliance as well. I will say from audit finding standpoint, again, the concepts of any issues with internal controls and the like is very similar from a definition standpoint to a financial statement audit, but the thresholds are a lot lower on a single audit because it's very specific in the instructions that the federal government provides about the level of testing that we had to do. So within these 3 programs, we did identify one item that is identified as a material weakness, and that was on the first grant, and it had to do with controls around subrecipient reporting. So anytime that you work with a subrecipient on grant funds, there's certain reporting that you have to do to the federal government on a particular website. The organization performed all those requirements. However, from a control standpoint, it was really performed by one person with lack of any oversight or review, just to make sure everything is appropriate and accurate. Now, I will state we didn't find any issues with anything. We felt it was accurate when all said and done, but really from a control environment standpoint, the organization really needs to adopt and really create a more of a control environment just to ensure that that information is reported on there on a basis. Yes, Doctor.
Jeff, Christina, are we gonna work on this? We got a plan.
We already fixed.
Yes, so currently our level of review is prior to submission into this portal. We are sort of moving the timing of our control so that the review happens upon submission, and that will satisfy this issue.
And the last comment I'll make related to that, so again, the thresholds for reporting that are quite low. Most importantly, I think for everybody in this room from a context standpoint is out of all the testing that we've done in this grant or any other grants, we didn't come across any issues or concern around anything like question call. So anything that you applied to the grant that was a concern to us. So that's most important. And we didn't find any issues around material non-compliance with the grant. So the one finding we had really is around a control environment. So when the federal government looks at this information or other grantors, not having those 2 items are really the issues or concerns really that they're going to have the most focus on. And I think that's it in terms of what we had, and happy to answer any questions that you may have on any information that we've covered today.
Any quick questions before we move on? Okay, I don't see any hands up, so thank you, Plant Brand, for that. With the knowledge we gained from our audit conference and presentation of the annual audit of 2025 system financial statement, I have a motion to recommend the acceptance of the 2025 audit opinion for the system's annual financial statements. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And the resolution for 2025 audit opinion for Metro Health System annual financial statements passes. Next, we're going to receive the ethics and compliance update presented by Sarah Partington. Sarah?
Thank you, Mr. Moss. Going to pull up the slides. So while they're pulling those up, I'll just say the second slide is really just a year in review, just a high level summary of some ethics and compliance activities in 2025. Want to go to the next slide, please. This is our ethics and compliance by the numbers. So our work plan percentage was 74% in 2025. That was a little bit lower. I like to see it in the 90%. In 2024, we were also at 74%, but in 2023, we're at 89% completion, and 2022 was 95% completion. The 74% completion rate was really due to some staffing levels, which we've addressed, and the team is looking forward to getting us back to those higher completion rates this year. Also just want to point out the box below in our policies, system-wide, we are about 70% compliant with our annual review period. We're also actively looking to increase that number, and we're developing a plan to update all of those plans and we'll report out those success rates in June board meetings. Next slide, please. This is our 2025 Q4 Metro Health Ethics Line review. I will note we did have a slight decrease in cases in Q4. I did take a dive into that. It looked like most of that was attributed to our proxy cases. So when employees report directly to compliance, we go in and we record them. Again, I think it was probably just staffing that probably led to us not reporting some of the smaller cases. But our average cases remain closed within 22 days compared to the national benchmark of 45. We actually expect the new benchmark data released later today, so we'll have some new benchmarks to share with the board in June. Next slide, please. This is just to highlight our anonymous follow-up report. So you'll note we have few anonymous reports, which is a good thing. You want your employees comfortable calling the team directly or sharing their name in the Metro Health Ethics line. We actually had 80% of our anonymous reporters follow up in December, which is a great trend. We want to continue seeing that because when reporters file anonymous reports, it's sometimes more difficult to actually get to the root cause and investigate faster, as those key takeaways stats indicate. That is it. The appendix does highlight the compliance goals from 2025, the activities that are attributed to those goals, as well as the percentage of the work plan by our key domains.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Any quick questions before I turn it over to Robin Bear, and she's going to talk about our internal audit. And Robin, why don't you start if I tell you what you see the difference between the internal and the external audit?
Yeah, so internal audit, we report directly to the board, but we are a Metro Health employee as well. So there's significant coordination between management and internal audit and the board. External audit they are hired by the state. They are representing external stakeholders and giving their opinion to the external public on the presentation and the accuracy over Metro Health's financial statements.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
You mentioned external auditors hired by the state, but don't we pay for it?
We do.
I thought they recommended, in this case, it's mandated.
Rotation.
Well, a rotation, but I thought, well, I know at the city of Lakewood, they would recommend options of approved auditors and we would pick one of those. But in this case, that's not the way it works.
No, that's correct. It's required. The state has a list of approved vendors to basically submit for the bid. So when the state publishes, because the state does all the bidding.
Right.
So when the state publishes the bid, then that list folks can apply. And then 95% of the scoring of the firms that ultimately get selected is actually done by the state. Metro Health has a 5% grading. We submit our grading criteria and we have a 5% sway in that decision. Ultimately, the state and Metro Health both had recommended Plant Moran as the auditor of choice. So we were aligned
So
with the
they
state
voted
scoring.
95, we voted 5, and we agreed.
And then, yeah, the accumulation of the scores ultimately determines the firm. So yes.
Yeah, and voted, they still had 95.
Yeah, the other piece I would clarify is that Plant Moran's scope is very specific to the accuracy of the financial statement audits. Where internal audit, we can evaluate any auditable risk, IT related, operational related, quality related, non-quality. Like our risk domain and risk coverage is much broader than the scope of Plant Moran.
And how many years has Plant Moran been our auditor?
This is their second year.
Second year. Because they referred to familiarity as helpful when they look at some of the assumptions and estimates, and they look back a year, how did you do, and look forward. So obviously, when you're first year, you don't have the benefit of that experience. So they were, well, obviously more familiar today than they
Yes.
were a year ago.
They have a great portfolio of clients like us, so very familiar in sort of who we are as Metro Health. But this is their second year with us. And so to be honest, though, it's also great to have a set of fresh eyes because our prior auditors RSM were with us for 15 years. So the audit process last year, sometimes it's good to have somebody who doesn't really know you intimately because they can sort of challenge some of what you're doing. And I think that only helps us.
Is it a 5-year term?
It's a 5-year term with an optional 5-year renewal. So 10 years is the max that they can stay with us.
Thank you.
Robin?
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Next slide, please. So I want to report out to the committee around an update on the IAA standards. So the IAA standards, they are essentially the expectation of all internal audit functions across the world, like regardless of what industry that you're in. And so one domain that the internal auditors included in the standards is a governing domain. That governing domain begins to introduce the concept of what are called essential conditions. That governing domain, because internal audit reports directly to the board, there are 3 principles that the board, through the Audit and Compliance Committee, are required to have a coordination and a good relationship between the board and internal audit. So we're just going to educate the Audit Committee on the 3 principles. And at the end of the day, bottom line, these are already in place and are operating today. This is just a good refresher for the Audit Committee because we are required to have this type of communication as part of our conformance with the standards. So next slide, please. Principle 6, this is all around making sure that internal audit has the clear authority to perform our function within the system. So I'm not going to read every single bullet point here, but the main pieces that I want to cover. The Audit Committee is already doing this today through the review and approval of our internal audit charter. That charter sets the foundation of what is really the purpose of internal audit, what is the scope of what all we can include. And it also defines our reporting relationship where internal audit reports directly to the Audit Committee and then administratively into management. You also help demonstrate your governance by approving our internal audit plan. You also help, we have private one-on-ones with the Audit Committee members where all members of management are excused in case there are any sensitive matters that we need to raise to the board's attention. Next slide, please. Principle 7, this is all around making sure that we are independent. And again, we achieve that independence by reporting directly to the Audit Committee. So that also means that the Audit Committee has the responsibility to approve who the internal audit leader is. And then if there were to ever be a decision to fire or remove the internal audit leader, the Audit Committee has that authority. Also, you set the roles and responsibilities for internal audit leader. So myself, right now, my focus is 100% internal audit. But if there were to ever be a question of me taking on additional responsibilities in the system, the Audit Committee has to approve that. It's not a decision that management can make on their own. Also, I have to maintain my independence. So if there's ever a situation where I feel like we're doing an audit and I'm not independent, I have to disclose that to the Audit Committee. And then the Audit Committee is also responsible for making sure we have appropriate safeguards in place to protect our independence. Next slide, please. And then Principle 8, this is really around how the Audit Committee is governing the function to make sure we are doing what we should be doing. So again, you approve our internal audit plan, we communicate our results, we have defined escalation protocols that warrant further discussion with the Audit Committee. I'm required to provide a progress update to the committee on our internal audit plan execution. Are we in conformance with the IA standards? And then our internal quality review process. But again, bottom line, this is already in place and operating. This is just a refresher. Any questions over the governing domain? No. Okay. Next slide, last slide. This is just a preview into our functions 2026 department goals. So we have, as a function, we are implementing our very first 3-year strategic plan. These 5 goals that you see here, they directly align to our functions 3-year strategic plan. But at the end of the day, if we're able to execute this, we're positioning internal audit to be a great partner to the system as a whole. Any questions?
Okay, if there's no further question, thank you, Ms. Bear. We're now going to move into executive session to discuss hospital trade secrets as defined by ORC 1333.61. Do I have a motion to recess into executive session to discuss these matters? Dr. Walker.
So moved.
Second, we are now heading into executive session. So I assume I'll come out and go back in, right? Tamika?
1 second, just 1 second.
Tamika, let me know when I'm good. Or if I'm
Okay, John,
We have a couple,
we are back in public session.
we have a couple approvals to take care of. Given the information that we heard in the executive session, are there any questions regarding the system's 2026 compliance work plan? There are none. I would like to have a voice vote approval of the Metro Health System 2026 compliance work plan. Do I have a motion to approve the 2026 compliance work plan?
So moved.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. The next topic, given the information we heard in the executive session, are there any questions regarding the system 2026 internal audit plan? If there's not, I would like to have a voice vote for approval of the Metro Health System 2026 audit plan. Do I have a motion to approve the 2026 internal audit plan?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then finally, given the information we heard in executive session, are there any questions regarding the internal audit function 3-year strategic plan? I'd like to have a voice vote approval of the internal audit function 3-year strategic plan. Do I have a motion to approve the internal audit function 3-year strategic plan?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. With no further business to come before the committee, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Robin.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited we got there. Late, sorry.
You moved.
I'm